Good afternoon and welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee meeting for December. The first item on the agenda is membership of committee, and we have a new lead member for Scrutiny, Councillor Pandor, here today. So can I ask the committee members please to introduce themselves? Councillor Cooper.
Andrew Cooper. I'm the chair of the Children's Scrutiny Panel.
Councillor Shamir Pandor, chair of the Region and Growth Panel.
Councillor Joe Lawson, chair of the Environment and Climate Change.
Councillor Bill Armour, lead member, Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny Panel.
And I'm Councillor Liz Smage, chair of the Management Committee. And we also have Councillor Turner, Cabinet member, who's here for some of the items on the agenda today. Minutes of previous meeting then. Do we all agree, those of us who were present for the minutes of the previous meeting? Yes, thank you. I do have a couple of updates from them. When we had the Director of West Yorkshire Joint Services, they've come back with a couple of answers to a couple of our questions. So the feasibility of owning a tobacco sniffer dog, I think we were asking about the use of dogs, weren't we? Versus the current practice of hiring dogs and handlers has been undertaken. The cost benefit of owning a dog is deemed not feasible due to the setup and operational costs. These costs include the purchase of a trained dog, employment of handler, kennel costs, vehicle transport costs, security industry authority licence, operational running costs, and the post-retirement cost for the whole life of the dog. Okay. So, yeah. So, the second question. We were asking about the big book of little scams. We were asking if there was any available. Unfortunately, no hard copies are available at this moment in time. This was previously funded by an external funding provider, and that funding is no longer available. However, there's an electronic version, and the link will be shared with members of the committee. In addition, the West Yorkshire Fraud Prevention Advice and Training Team are currently sharing a booklet produced by national charity Independent Age, which covers all the relevant information around scams and frauds. These are free to order, and a link will be shared. All right, so that's the update from there. Declarations of interests then. Does any member have any interests they wish to declare? No? Thank you. All items are in public, and the meeting is being webcast and will be able to be viewed on the council's website. Deputations and petitions, we haven't got any, but we do have public questions. So, Mr. Mason, I believe you have 2 questions for us. If you want to present your first question, thank you.
During meetings with representatives of Kirklees Active Leisure and Kirklees Council, it was pointed out that the fair price forever offered for many years by Cal seemed an unworkable business policy. This option has subsequently been revoked for future membership as of 9th of October 23. It has been mentioned that Cal are looking at the legalities of retrospectively bringing members paying a lower, outdated fee in line with today's pricing. Members at Colne Valley Leisure Centre attending regular community meetings have stated their willingness to pay not only today's rate, but even to trial for geographical pricing, paying increased fees to help with the future funding. Will Scrutiny recommend to Cabinet that this is given due consideration when making the decision on future of CVLC?
Okay. I think my answer is going to be
Yeah.
to question 2 actually, but I'll give it now for you. Okay. Under the Kirklees Active Leisure item on today's agenda, we'll be asking questions around both the consultation report that's in our papers and the Cabinet report that was published last night. Any recommendations that we do make at the end of our deliberations, we will feed into the Cabinet meeting next week. There is a process in place for us to do so after the Cabinet report has been published, and we will be following that process with any recommendations that the committee make today. Okay? But we'll bear your questions in mind, yeah. Do you want to do, have you got a supplementary or? Okay.
When the news first broke of the proposal to close CBLC, the community did initially call into question the business model of CAL. There was no offence intended as to the management of CAL. The community was just trying to find solutions to help their centre stay open. During later meetings with representatives of Kirklees Council, it became very clear that CAL were working extremely hard to help secure the future of CBLC. The community would like to firstly thank CAL for the outcome of this work and the partnership with Kirklees in partnership with Kirklees Council have offered to collaborate on the future of CBLC by way of working together as part of a three-way steering group dedicated to a sustainable future. Again, will Scrutiny recommend to Cabinet that this is given due consideration?
Yeah. Refer to my earlier response. Yeah. Okay. Do you have your supplementary as well? No, that was me supplementary. Okay. All right. Okay.
Okay, during meetings with representatives of Kirklees Active Leisure and the Council, it was pointed out that members of the community using CBLC had advised payments had not been taken for fees and or activities. Since pointing this out, members have now reported that the memberships have been amended, noting that CAL has improved its administration around collecting payments and is now working to ensure funds for CBLC are maximised. Again, same question, will Scrutiny.
I'm sure there'll be questions around the future, so we will consider our recommendations at the end of the meeting, at the end of the item. Okay. Yeah, Mr. Marriott.
Hi, good afternoon. During meetings with representatives of Kirklees Council, it was pointed out that members of the community using Combe Valley Leisure Centre would be willing to help fundraise to assist with the works required over the coming years, helping to maintain the facility and ensuring funding is in place for the future of Combe Valley Leisure Centre. Will Scrutiny recommend to Cabinet that this is given due consideration when making their decisions on the future of Combe Valley Leisure Centre?
We will look at our recommendations at the end of the item. Yep. Okay, all right. But we will bear your comments in mind when we get to that. Yeah? Yeah, have you got a second
no supplementary, but a second question.
Second question, okay.
During initial research by members of the community using Combe Valley Leisure Centre, it was noted that as of March 2023, HMRC revised the treatment of VAT on in-house leisure services for councils. This could benefit Kirklees Council spending on leisure centres, but also with a change in the relationship model between CAL and Kirklees Council, it has the possibility to benefit CAL's spending on leisure centres and therefore the possibility of making greater funds available for these centres. This information has been passed to Kirklees Council representatives, and will Scrutiny recommend that Cabinet give due consideration when making their decision on the future of Combe Valley Leisure Centre?
So I think same answer, but we will be asking questions around the financial aspects of the proposals. Okay. So when we get to that, we will make sure that there is a question about the finances on that. Okay. All right. But please do stay for the item to listen to the questions and the answers. All right. Okay. Thank you. Right. So that moves us then into... Councillor Cooper, did you have a... No. Okay. That moves us then into the Kirklees Active Leisure item. Councillor Turner, are you wanting to start with this?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for inviting me today to discuss this item. Firstly, I'd like to thank all our staff who's been working incredibly hard for the last few weeks, dealing with all the responses to the consultation. It's a very short time frame to deal with this 17,000 responses, and they've worked really, really hard, gone above and beyond the call of duty in that effect. So I thank all those staff involved in that, and obviously Cal, who has worked with us very closely over the last few months to get the information we required, and worked closely with us to get to the point where we are today. So thanks to everybody involved, and I'm going to hand over to Adele, who's going to give you a short presentation. So if you want to watch the screens, you will have some pretty pictures coming in a moment. And I think you'll all agree that this is a better outcome than we envisaged several months ago, and it is down to the hard work of our team and Cal. And of course the public who gave us some really good ideas.
Good afternoon, everyone. I don't know if that was a reminder to me to make this a short presentation. There are quite a few slides, but I will skip through some of them because you hopefully have been able to read the initial findings from the consultation with your papers. I know it was late yesterday afternoon when the papers for Cabinet were published, but hopefully you've been able to have a look at the report that will go to Cabinet on the 12th of December. But I'm going to give you an overview of that paper if you haven't had a chance to read it, so that you're aware of the key points within it. So starting off, I'm going to remind you of what the proposal was that we went out to the public to consult with. We talked about a core offer, which was basically saying Huddersfield Leisure Centre and Spen Valley Leisure Centres would remain open. There was then a group of sites where we weren't really proposing closure, and I think this has been misunderstood sometimes by the public. What we were saying was we are seeking to keep these open, but if circumstances change over the next few months, we may have to re-look at these sites. So those are the sites there under the marginal offer. And then there were 3 sites that were proposed for closure. That was Batley, Colne Valley and Dewsbury. So the next slide gives you that overview of the consultation. It took place over 6 weeks, and it is the largest response the council has ever had to any public consultation. You can see there were 17,860 responses. The majority of those were online, but there were over 700 responses which were paper copies that staff then inputted in to the online system. We wanted to ensure that as many people as possible could take part in the consultation, and so there were various drop-in sessions where council officers went along to those sites listed there and were able to help people that were struggling to complete the forms. There were paper copies available at all Cal sites and at our customer service centres, because it was important that we also sought the views of people that don't use Cal centres, because in the end what we're consulting about is the use of council tax and public monies. We held 4 focus groups to ensure those with protected characteristics had a voice, and you can see listed there the groups that we spoke to. And we did some targeted promotion, working with our colleagues within the third sector, who particularly work with young people and with older people, for them to encourage people to take part in the consultation. This next map shows you where the responses came from. You can see there were a lot of responses that came from the valleys and from kind of Denbydale, Kirkburton area, and of course responses that were very near to Batley Sports and Tennis Centre. And you can also see the red line boundary, which is Kirklees, that we also receive responses from neighbouring authorities, because of course for most people there isn't a red line that you have to cross over. It's fluid, and people do come from other areas to use our centres, and vice versa. So moving on, I won't go through this in detail, but for anybody that likes statistics, that's in your report, and you can see how many people took part and how that broke down. Although there were people outside of Kirklees that took part, 93% were Kirklees residents that took part in the consultation. And you can see also that 74% were current members of a Cal Leisure Centre and 22% were parents and carers of children that were using the centres. So when we go on to the key findings, here you can see that 60% agreed with the proposal to keep Huddersfield and Spen Valley open. 46% agreed with the proposal around marginal sites, but we did get some feedback through the consultation surveys that people really didn't understand what marginal meant. And 19% agreed with the closure proposal, which surprised me, that it was so high that nearly a fifth of respondents agreed to the closure of those 3 centres. Lots of differing views, of course. Now you can see here, we had 47,000 individual comments that have had to be analysed over a 2-week period. So as Councillor Turner said, it's been a massive job and the team have been absolutely amazing. So these are some of the themes that in the survey. We asked about the impact of the proposals. Of course, people reported it was mainly around financial. Lots of views around the impact the closure of any centres were going to have on people's physical and mental well-being. And also, really, for older people, it was that kind of reduced social network that they find they get through the centres, which was of concern to them, and they felt it would increase levels of loneliness. We asked what would be the barriers to accessing other leisure facilities. It tended to be travel, transport, how people got there. For some people, it was like, it's going to take me 3 buses to get to another centre. That was of concern to them. It was the increased time it was going to take, and it was the increased cost. We asked the public, have you any suggestions for reducing the deficit? There was lots of comments about Cal improving their kind of operational and financial management. They've taken that on board, and in the new proposal, they've looked at being as efficient as possible with their staffing levels. They talked about closing the swimming pools, but keeping the dry side activities open, because it's the swimming pools that are the major, and I don't mean this to be a pun, but drain on resources. And they also talked about increasing provision, so there were more classes for people to access and more opportunities for external sports practitioners, fitness practitioners, etc., to be able to book space there to run their own classes. And then we asked for suggestions for alternative funding, and as the Colne Valley group members have said, you know, lots of people came back saying they were prepared to pay more money, they were prepared to pay for parking at some of the sites. They felt that we needed to look at corporate sponsorship, seek more government funding, and make more funding bids. So all of that has been taken into account when looking at what the future proposal is. So these are the key stakeholders that wrote to us, both national organisations and also local ones. There were lots of letters came in around Batley Sports and Tennis Centre. The consultation was really positive in how it's helped us to learn more about the centres, who was using them, how they're using them. So this led to Cal going away, looking at how it reduced its expenditure and looking at how it could increase its income. And also, there have been some factors that have changed over the last few months, which meant they could remodel their finances, knowing more about how much membership they were able to retain when a site closed. They learnt that from Dewsbury having to close because of RAC. And they learnt more about energy consumption. They've been able to reduce their energy consumption, and energy prices have been falling, and so that's had a big effect as well. So those are the sites that it is proposed will remain open, and that includes Batley Sports and Tennis Centre and Colne Valley Leisure Centre, which were 2 of the sites that were earmarked for closure. So how could they do this? Well, the closure of Dewsbury and then Cal serving notice to withdraw from the Stadium Health and Fitness Club means that reduces expenditure significantly. Cal are also in the midst of moving their head office from the stadium to Huddersfield Leisure Centre. That saves substantial costs, and as well as relocating Cal's head office, they have been making reductions to their head office staff team, 21% reduction so far in those corporate core costs. I was glad to hear that the Colne Valley members have noticed there's been an improvement in taking membership fees. Cal have taken the direct debit system back in-house and now have full control of the membership system. That is helping in making sure they're collecting more, but also means they're not left with a hefty fee that they were going to face from outsourcing. They've with closure of centres and looking at different staff models, they've been able to start decreasing staff numbers already, and 33 staff have been made redundant so far. They also moved to an essential spend approach, which has meant they're able to reduce their expenditure for this year and meant that they were able to look at reductions in expenditure for next year. And one of the things they haven't done yet, but are going to do, is to work with customers to look at opening hours and actually close when there's little demand, but ensure they're open when there's most demand. In terms of increasing income, they found that when they increased their prices this year, they actually retained more members than is usual. So they've been able to revise their kind of membership forecasts. They also retained more members when sites closed than they expected. So over 900 members from Dewsbury have moved to other sites already. Also, they've been able to retain all the school swimming income. They were able to transfer all the schools from Dewsbury to other sites. That has helped. And the proposal that you now see means that they can still accommodate all schools in Kirklees moving forward. They're reviewing things like aquatics club use, and there may have to be increase in charges or reduction in use to be able to leave space for those income-generating activities. And Batley Girls High School have been absolutely fantastic during the consultation period, have come forward, want to work more closely with Cal, and have also agreed to pay more, have actually offered more money to use the site, so that has helped too. In doing the financial remodelling, there are various assumptions that have been made. So it's very easy for everybody to say, oh, just up the prices. But actually, for any business, they have to balance increasing prices with retaining members, because you can increase the prices and end up worse off. So they are being quite prudent at the moment, and they're looking at how much they can actually increase by while still retaining members. Pay and play prices will go up in 2024. Fitness memberships will go up, and there's very likely to be a two-tier model whereby the sites where they're able to make some improvements, such as Sisset and Holmfirth, are likely to have to pay more than at other sites. This also assumes that once we've gone through the consultation, once Cabinet have approved the proposal, that membership stays stable. If it suddenly drops a lot when prices rise, that would make this model a little bit shaky, and we'd have to go back and review again. But if members stay and if membership increases as well, then that is good within this modelling. It's assumed that the schools will stay with them, but also all those wanting swimming lessons for their children will stay. They've also, instead of expecting the council to give them additional money to cover increases to salaries as a result of the increase in the national living wage, they have actually modelled that here so that any additional income they're able to raise will cover off those salary costs. And they've looked at, within the modelling, removing the discount for passport to leisure cardholders from the exercise referral programmes. So this is where GPs have been referring people through to Cal, and Cal's been covering the kind of cost of that. Actually, we're going to seek funding to make that up, because we don't want people who have passport to leisure suffering from this. And we're also going to be opening up discussions with our health partners to see if health themselves, when they refer people, will make that difference between what someone can pay and the true cost. So this has led to these key financial changes. You can see that since May through to this version 3 of the model, how things have changed, that actually by increasing prices, etc., it looks like that Cal can make an additional £900,000 in income, but they're already saving around £1 million in energy due to the drop in prices and reducing consumption levels. I did say, the first thing I said when I saw that, I went, that's £17,240 above what we've told you as a council we can afford to pay. But Cal can cover that off within their reserves. So the council will still only contribute to the partnership £2.555 million. Through the last few months and through listening to our citizens and through various potential partners coming forward, we realised that there needs to be a different way of working, and that we need to establish new partnerships. And so you can see some of the people that have said they want to work with us at Batley, and you've heard from the Colne Valley Group how they want to work with us as well. That will be really important in terms of assisting with fundraising for those sites. But we also need to have a much more strategic and proactive approach to fundraising. And that's where the council and Cal will work much better together to seek out those opportunities. And we also need to refresh our partnership, review the funding agreement, the leases, and also look at a new kind of model whereby we are working much better with our communities. So these are the 3 sites that Cal will withdraw from. Oh, I'll just skip to... So with regard to Deaton Sports Arena, we have asked Cal to continue in managing the arena until the 31st of March 2024, and that they can do that within the current funding package for this year. We will review it in late February, early March, because it's dependent on some discussions that are going on at the moment with a potential partner who may take over that site. And also ward members in the Ashbrow ward are working with a community group to look at how they can get involved in the running of the site. So we'll see how things go and then take a pause, review the situation to see if we can maintain access, particularly to the sports hall and changing rooms for the local community in Ashbrow. With regard to the stadium, Cal served notice in September. We'll pull out of the site by the 24th of December, and they closed to the public last Thursday on the 30th of November. The council's now working with Kirklees Stadium Development Company to try and secure an alternative operator for that site. And with regard to Dewsbury Sports Centre, if you have a look at the Cabinet report, there is an appendix there that details the issues with Dewsbury Sports Centre, gives you pictures of the rack. I would like to put to rest the rumours that are circulating that say there is no rack. There definitely is rack at Dewsbury Sports Centre. We are going to look at whether it's possible to access the dry side activities. The rack is over the wet side, but it's also in the reception area, which means we can't give access through at the moment to the dry side facilities. So we're looking at an alternative access point. But we're very clear that if we were to open Dewsbury, that could destabilise the business plan that we now have, because what's making some of those other sites financially viable is the fact that Dewsbury members have moved to other sites. We know it's affordable, is that proposal, but if Dewsbury then comes back into the mix, we would have to review that business plan again. But what we do need to do so that the citizens of Dewsbury don't lose out here is we need to be developing a longer term plan for physical activity within Dewsbury, and already discussions have opened up with potential partners for that. That's the end of me.
Thank you. Right, I'll open it up for questions then from the committee. Councillor Cooper.
So yeah, good work, loads of some good outcomes there, and obviously loads of work gone into that, and so well done to all the staff who are involved, so great. A few thoughts. Energy costs are very volatile. I just wonder about the sustainability and of the proposals that are here. Given that energy costs are volatile, and we've seen that, if there's a rise going forward, does that put us in a position again? So there's that. That brings into a sort of question as to how much headroom there is, how much margin there is for rises in prices, rises in costs, and just wondering if we another couple of years we might be in a similar position again. And so getting some sort of idea about sustainability and about that headroom on costs would be important. School income from swimming. I know that some schools are looking at alternative provision, and you now can get at a much cheaper price travelling swimming pools which will arrive at your school and set up for a period of weeks to provide ongoing swimming training for a set period of time. And it's attractive to schools because it's cheaper. They still do the curriculum, but it means less income to Kirklees Active Leisure, and I just wondered whether that had been taken into account. Energy management, from when I've looked in the past at Cal, it's one of their real strengths, I think, has been energy management in the past. They've been pretty hot in terms of managing the energy that they've got. Obviously, costs are what costs are. So I'm wondering what actual scope there is to actually make savings in energy beyond just simply accepting a cost reduction, and if there's any appetite from the council to try and improve the energy efficiency and involve renewable energy at the site. So I'd be interested to know about that. We heard about the VAT arrangements and about the changes in VAT. My understanding was that the reason, one of the reasons for having CAL was because of the financially advantageous VAT arrangements that you have by having a separate operator. I'm happy to be wrong, but if that's changed, then because I think there are lots of councils which have outsourced their leisure activities, and I understood that it was VAT that was the reason. But if I'm wrong, I'm happy to be wrong. Last thing from me, sorry, last thing from me is about fundraising and hypothecation and sustainability of that. I mean, there's been great offers being made about raising funds to try and keep Colne Valley Centre open and things, which is great. And I'm just wondering about how do you budget for that, and how do you budget for fundraising, and how do you actually make sure that that is sustainable going forward? Because I guess voluntary activities by community support council services is an interesting area as to how you go about it, because you think about all the things that people care about and the things that they'll put money into. So a bit of commentary on that would be useful. And we've seen some headline figures, but it'd be actually quite interesting to see a bit more detail around the sort of viability going forward. Okay, that's me.
I'll try to remember all of those. So you might have to, right, there were so many, I know, that's fine. So looking at the sustainability moving forward, and that might answer quite a few of your questions, it's tight. There is a private appendix to the Cabinet report which has the detail of the budget, but because CAL has to compete within a commercial world, we are not at liberty to share that in public. So if that's one thing that this committee would like to see, I guess I would need to come back and present that in a private part of your meeting. And the reason we do that and we protect that is we still need to keep an eye to the future, in that we want Cal over the next 12 to 24 months to have a chance to stabilise and to see if this model works. But if it got to a position where we were unhappy with Cal, or Cal themselves were not financially viable, and we went to the commercial, went out to market, we decided to test the market, we would have just put all that information out into the public domain, which kind of undermines the whole procurement process. So that's why we protect those figures. There's very little headroom, but what's not built into the budget at the moment, it doesn't have a line which says £100,000 fundraising. So any of the fundraising activities is the bit that's going to give us the headroom. The other thing is that it's actually easier sometimes to raise money for capital funding and for some of the capital works that need to happen with the centres, which is outside of this revenue budget. So it may be, for instance, and I'm looking at Carl and John, where we've talked about the boilers at Combe Valley Leisure Centre. Maybe, for instance, working with the community, we can raise the money that makes a contribution to those boilers, takes the pressure off the council with that capital investment. So that's the kind of approach there. With regard to the VAT thing, when Cal was first set up, it was about business rates, because they could access business rates relief. It has been just local authorities that were able to benefit from the VAT, but now it's kind of been extended. So Martin Durnley, our head of audit, has already looked into this. When he looked into it, it wasn't really beneficial to us because of the present relationship that we have with Cal, but he's agreed that after Christmas, we will pick this up, we will do a full exploration of it, we will look at whether a change in relationship with Cal could lead to Cal being able to access some of the benefits from that. But at the moment, it's one of those things that's on the list to look at, and then we'll report back at a later stage whether it's beneficial or not.
So just come back on one or two things. I think it's really sensible what you're saying about using the fundraising income as treating like capital for capital projects, because that can help with the viability going forward and revenue projects. So that's a really sensible approach. So I support that. Business rates, not VAT. Right, okay, fair dues. The school income thing on travelling swimming pools, they come along with a swimming pool, they fill it up with water, as you'd expect. They cover it up, and then they will put it in a playground for an area, and people will come and use those facilities. I had a presentation on it at a governing body who are looking at it, and they're going to save a fortune, but that's a fortune that's not coming to Cal. So just a thought there on that, and if that takes off and becomes more of a thing when there are schools that are hard pressed with their own budgets, so that's.
There won't be many companies out there though offering that service, so it's not going to be able to service loads and loads of schools. And with the closure of Batley Baths, some schools went to private operators. They're now wanting to come back to Cal. They don't get the quality that they were getting at Cal, so things change over time, don't they? And we just need to keep an eye on it. And
that's the point.
Yeah.
You know.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
Have I answered all your questions?
Councillor Pandor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that report. Quite clearly, there's a lot of work that's gone in, and my thank yous to all the staff involved. I'm just going to focus on the potential closures at Batley Sports Centre, Combe Valley and Dewsbury. So Batley and Combe Valley are staying open, which is great news. Dewsbury Sports Centre, there's been a lot of emails, a lot of conversations that are taking place regarding Dewsbury Sports Centre and swimming pool. And I understand that a lot of members have actually moved from Dewsbury to elsewhere, but they were given no choice. So we need to understand that, if the choice was there, they would still stay there. Also, when Batley Baths and Sports Centre closed, one of the arguments we used were that the women that were using that facility would be able to access Dewsbury Sports Centre. and I'm sure you know the detail regarding sauna and religious observation and everything. And now that offer is not there at the moment. So and we need to just understand how that offer can be continued for women, especially from a BME background, because of their faith, and women generally who might want to just have facilities for women only facilities. Dewsbury has got the swimming pool and the dry side, which I understand. And questions that are coming out are, if we are going to be shutting the wet side, the swimming pool, then we kept the dry side open while the pandemic was going on. It was a temporary measure that we had in terms of reception. So if we can just have some information around that in terms of what's the feasibility around that. Because if you look at the consultation and the way the feedback came, there's a very clear picture that emerges. It's like a donut, and in the middle where you've got the urban settlements. If you look at the poverty, the deprivation, the health inequalities, that's where the biggest issues are. If you look at the index of multiple deprivation, that's where the biggest need is. And Dewsbury does provide a service to a lot of that deprivation, a lot of the health inequalities.
Question here.
Well, it says questions and comments, so I'm just you know, trying to actually cover both aspects. But my question is, right, is if we're trying to address all these health inequalities, we need some kind of a plan to actually look at Dewsbury in terms of the dry side and the wet side. I understand the wet side will be more challenging, but you mentioned capital. So maybe we might want to look at how we can actually look at capital in terms of the wet side. But the key question is, we need to get the communications out there, because there's a lot of, I won't say misinformation, but people don't know what's happening in terms of, you know, you mentioned earlier on, Adele, that is the rat there, isn't the rat there? So if we can get something out there with the summary of the feasibility report, this is what it's shown. But my question really is that we need to get the dry side up and running as quickly as possible, because that does address massive inequalities that exist there, both in terms of health inequalities, in terms of poverty, in terms of people, in terms of accessibility, and that I think that what we see is only the tip of the iceberg. So hope that. Yes. There are quite a few questions in there.
I'll pick this up. So last Wednesday morning, I actually went over to Dewsbury and we had a good look round the wet site for a start. We looked at the boiler room. We looked at the rack in the boiler room, and I'm not a structural engineer, but when I see a piece of concrete that goes like that, I know that's not particularly good. We went actually up into what they call the void, so we were above the pool in the swimming pool area, right up in the rafters there. You have to go up a loft ladder, it's quite tight. And there were racking there with bits that had dropped off. You could see the bits missing. And I didn't know this, but when the builder would rack, they literally pushed them together, so there's no joint in between them, so they don't stick to each other, the sections. So as they're moving, the bits where you can nearly put your fingers in between them, so they're moving that way as well as downwards. So I can assure categorically that there is racking Dewsbury, and in my opinion, as a layman, when I see something that's going like that and the bits falling off, I think that is unsafe. We also looked around the pool itself, and those who've used Dewsbury will know that there are problems with the cracking around the pool. It would appear that the pool structure itself is probably come to the end of its life. There's distortion with some of the tiles within the pool, and they had to, on a regular basis, go around and regrout them, excuse me, because they were causing people to cut their feet. So there's a pool tank itself, which is an issue, rack in the roof, but the rack goes right across to the dry side. So when you come in the entrance, you are going through rack. So if you were to use that entrance to go across the bridge, for those of you who know it, you would have to prop all that to make that safe. And I don't know how you get in with a wheelchair possibly, or push chairs when you're having to go through props. So that's probably unfeasible. You're right, there was a temporary measure for COVID, but the word's temporary. To put up, it would need a proper entrance put in there. It would also need possibly, we believe, some agreement with third-party landowners for access to that. The car parks don't work as it is with the new entrance. The other issue, of course, is the boilers are in the wet side, so there's no boiler in the dry side. So you'd have to put a new boiler in to drive the dry side. So while we were there, we discussed with the let's do some costings. Let's see how feasible it is. We think there might be space for a boiler, but let's have some costings and see how it works out, and we'll see once that. We have made it very, very clear in the Cabinet report that we are looking at alternative provision within Dewsbury for health and well-being. Those conversations I know were being held with external organisations last week while we were actually in Dewsbury. I know those conversations were going on with external funders. So we are going to look at the wider offer for Dewsbury as we move forward. So we have to cost up the problem with the wet side, and we have to cost up the issues about whether we can put a temporary or a permanent access into the dry side. The problem being, as Adele rightly pointed out, is that this business model now is predicated on the fact that a lot of those people have gone to Batley and Spain, so we've got that income coming in. They've actually retained more members than we thought, so that's been a real positive. And there's quite a lot of stiff competition in Dewsbury for dry side activities. There's a new gym, and it won't be to the quality of Cal, I know that, but there is a new one opening literally opposite Cal, considerably cheaper as well. So it is a commercial market. So we need to be careful that if it stacks up financially, and we'll have to wait and see, you want to open that up, would that become then a drain on the finances of Cal, which would then have a knock-on effect or a ripple effect across the rest of the organisation. So there's a lot of work yet to do around Dewsbury, but rest assured, there is racking there, it is dangerous, and I'm glad I'm not having to go back myself, and I wouldn't send my family or children or grandchildren into that building, because in my opinion, it is unsafe. And whilst it may last another 100 years, it may also fall down next week. Who knows? You can't tell these things. So, yes. And for some people as well, keep telling me the equipment's being removed. All the equipment is absolutely there. The only thing that's being removed is the vending machines, which don't belong to Cal. But all the equipment is there. If anybody wants, I've got loads of photos of rack and equipment that I took. So that's where we are with Dewsbury at the moment. But it's an ongoing conversation about what we can do as an alternative provision.
Okay, thanks. Can we address the women-only sessions, please? Because I think actually there's some at Batley at Sports Centre. Yeah, Adele.
Yeah, so after Batley Baths closed and after consultation with women in the Batley community, some measures were put in place at Batley Sport and Tennis Centre to make sure that the swimming pool could be closed off and was private, and some extra women-only sessions were programmed in there. There's also the kind of, I'm using the word private, aren't I? It's not a private pool as such, but it is a closed pool at Spen Valley, because we built that as part of the new building to ensure that women that wanted that privacy, and not just women, there are others that want that privacy, could have that, and made sure that we got the changing rooms and everything right for that. And again, additional classes were put on at Spen.
All right, thank you. Can I just ask a few questions then myself? So the consultation process itself, during the consultation process, there were a lot of questions asked about the information that was given, and some information seemed to be contradictory to other information. And we had some centres that were described as having full facilities where they didn't have facilities that were that other centres had, etc. There were quite a few questions around that. I think we talked about, we've had this before, but I'm just wondering if, and I realise you had an enormous amount of responses, but whether there's going to be any review process for lessons that can be taken forward for other consultations as a result of what has happened, please.
That meeting is in the diary for next week, so the team's coming back together to have a full debrief session, and only today Rebecca Strutt, the Transformation Project Manager that's been supporting me, sent an email out to everyone with a template for them to fill in so that we can go through all those lessons learned.
Can I also ask then about the modelling that you're proposing to do? You're going to say, in your recommendations on your Cabinet report, you say you're asking the Cabinet to agree to phase 2 of the Leisure Centre programme, focusing on the vision for sport and physical activity. But you don't actually have, you mentioned in your report about 2024, but you don't actually have any definitive timeline for that. So when in 2024, do you have an estimation of how long that will take, that process? And are you going to be building on partnerships that have already been suggested and made in order to talk to people about that modelling going forward?
So you're quite right. We don't have a timescale at the moment. I think it would be towards the back end of 2024. We are in discussions with a potential national partner to support us. Until those discussions have ended, I don't want to name them, that will help us. And we're also, Richard is leading discussions around how we resource this as well, because you'll be aware that for some time there hasn't been that strategic lead for sport and physical activity within the local authority, and so we're going to have those discussions about how we take this forward.
Can I also ask about Deaton Sports Centre, because your recommendations are saying that the options to maintain community access to the facility can be explored within the next 12 to 24 months. So are we saying you're going to have those discussions whilst the facility is still available, and only at the conclusion of all of those explorations that you talk about in your report, what will happen then if there's no resolution?
We would have to revisit the decision, and it may be moving to disposal at that point in time. The reason we expect a conclusion to the discussions much earlier than 12 to 24 months. The 12 to 24 months timeline is really about one potential partner when they would be ready to take that site over. So that's why we've given ourselves that kind of time span at the moment.
Can I also then ask about the finance and the sustainability? Because, as been said, we don't want to be in the same place that we are now next year if, for instance, energy prices rise or membership suddenly goes down, because you said it was a fine line, didn't you? So what plans, if this decision goes ahead next week, how are you going to identify early on that the budget information that you have for the future, how are you going to identify if there are any problems with that going forward as quickly as possible so that they can be addressed as quickly as possible? Yeah.
So one of the things that's emerged from this, in my opinion, is the fact that our relationship with Cal could be much improved. And I think Cal recognise that. So we're going to be working much closer with them, and as I pointed out, partners and hopefully the community. I'm not going to be a bit careful with what I say, because I've already prepared what I'm going to say next week at Cabinet. So we want the community to become involved. We are looking at other partners, and we want to work closely with Cal. So part of that process in my diary already is every month I will have a meeting with Adele, and every quarter I will have a meeting with Cal. And at that point, I would expect them to bring to those meetings their financial projections, where they are, what they're looking forward to. So we'll have a much closer eye, possibly, on their operations, so we can work together to spot any things coming down the road that we can second guess. Nobody second guess COVID, nobody second guess the war in Ukraine. So where it's possible, where an emerging trend or a trend is emerging, we can act quickly and swiftly to try and address that. So that's my plan going forward, to be much closer to Cal and keep an eye. And they'll work with us on that, and then we'll get a better outcome, I believe.
Councillor Pandor.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just one question, Graham. If we can also look at when the time is right to bring them in-house. I'm sure we've learnt a lot over the last few months, but one of the options needs to be, when the time is right, that can we bring them in-house?
As you know yourself, that's a discussion that's been going on for many years. I think probably the week after we took them out of house, if you like. There is huge financial benefits to doing it this way, and we're not the only local authority that does it this way. As Councillor Cooper alluded to, we save it somewhere in the region, we estimate, of about £800,000 in business rates, which is not an insignificant amount, even in this day and age. So that would have to be a decision for Cabinet at some point in the future. As Adele rightly pointed out, we need to spend the next 12 months stabilising Cal, developing these new relationships and getting them almost back on the feet and moving forward before any decision as to whether to bring it back in-house is made. But it does come with a cost, and that cost may be, at some leisure centres, if another £800,000 out of the budget, it could be we have to reduce the estate. So it's a lot of money that we save by doing it this way. So, and I say, it's a business model that's been replicated up and down the country, simply to save that business rates.
Yeah, the reason why I said that, Graham, is because what you just said, completely agree with you, but we need to get that over to the users and the residents, because one of the questions that keeps on coming out is, why don't you bring it back in-house? So our messaging needs to be more stronger, so people understand that actually by bringing it in-house might not be the best option. Thanks.
I presume that when you're looking at the model and the vision for moving forward, then you will be looking at the whole of the strategy rather than just one particular option. You will be looking at a whole strategy for the future. Yes? Yes. Okay, thank you. All right, are there any other questions from the panel on this item? Right, okay, so can we just have a look then? These recommendations on this Cabinet report are going next week. If Scrutiny wishes to have any recommendations put to the Cabinet, we need to agree some recommendations. We will stay after the meeting to word any of these, but just as far as the meeting is concerned. So, sustainability and energy efficiency is something that we're concerned about, and you also have anything about in your recommendations about capital investment, and you're saying about essential repairs, and I'm just wondering if there ought to be a plan moving forward for capital investment, so something doesn't happen all in one year. There is a graduated plan for capital investment across the sites. I think we could ask for that. And also in the model, are you all right? Are you okay? And also about sustainability and early identification of any problems. That needs to be key. Councillor Cooper?
I think there was the point about headroom as well, about the need for headroom in this, because it's volatile energy costs. Do you want to share?
And in your recommendations, I might have missed it. Okay, so but in your recommendations, I didn't see anything about partnerships in the Councillor Turner's points. You've responded about working with the public and about the pricing structure as well. You've talked about the pricing structure. But in the officer recommendations, I don't really see much about building partnerships, both with community and other stakeholders, and building on the relationships that have been formed in order to look at those external fundraising opportunities, etc. And I think that perhaps there ought to be some particular mention of that in the decision. I think you've addressed the VAT question that we had. Yes? Yeah, okay. And you've also addressed, I think, about the membership when you've said that Cal has taken control of that process now, and therefore the members the membership charges will, the income from them will be generated better. And there also, we talked about a plan for Dewsbury and bringing that forward as well. You say that in your recommendations. But about the model and there being a time frame for that model. So it doesn't go on adding for, you know, there is something definite in 2024. But I would also like to say that I was pleased to see in the report that there was quite a bit of mention of health and well-being and social isolation and loneliness, because I think that was one of the major things that people were concerned about, was about their health and well-being as a result of a loss of service, and also about social isolation and loneliness. And the OWLS groups are a particular help with maintaining people's social contact and health and well-being. Right, and we also talked about comms as well, didn't we? Having better comms. So after the cabinet meeting, having better comms on the proposals going forward and what this means for people who use the facilities. Yeah? Have I missed anything out? No, have I covered all the points that everybody had? Yes? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. So we'll word some recommendations around those points for you and we'll let you have them. Okay? Thank you. Okay, members. We will move on then to the financial management update. And I believe the finance officer is online for this. Councillor Turner, did you have anything to say before we moved into that item?
Just Isabella, I believe it should be online. Thanks, Del. Thanks, Richard. And you will see that after the last month, we significantly improved our projected overspend by the end of the year. But Isabella will give you all the actual details because I haven't actually got any physical details on this. So I'm relying on Isabel, but I know we'll do a fantastic job in presenting the position. But we have improved significantly, which is a real positive.
Okay, thank you.
I hope she's there.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, Isabel.
I'm hoping, I can't see any of you, but I'm hoping that you can see that on the screen. Is that there now, the slide deck?
Yes, we can see it, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. So this is the Q2 monitoring that went to Cabinet on the 14th of November. And I'm just going to give you a sort of an overview of where we are. As Councillor Turner said, we have improved our position. Our forecast overspend is now at £16 million rather than the £20 million that we were showing. The savings to be delivered in year have slightly improved as well from against the target of 19 million, and actually our usable reserves forecast have increased as well due to some of the changes that have occurred, some of the reductions in spend, and also we had £9.4 million returned from the West Yorkshire Combined Authority to mitigate against future pressures that we might have. So we've got that in the can as well, which is good. So the monitoring, as you can see, over the period from Q1 to Q2 has improved in all areas. And the slide deck shows you in each area what those changes are. I'm not going to spend too much time going through them in detail. As we can see, there are still very large pressures going on in children's and families still continues to be of concern for deliverability within the actual budget that we have considered for 23-24. As we go forward and we look through some of these issues that are occurring through each of the service areas, we're making sure that we try to address them as we put the medium-term financial plan together, and making sure where there are issues that we can change and activity that we can change in order to reduce costs, we are doing so. But where there are pressures that we are unable to reduce and pressures that are just ongoing. We are trying to make sure that we build those into the medium-term financial plan. So as this is I don't think it's necessary probably for me to go through this as a summary. So whereabouts are we with the council's reserves? So the council's reserves currently sitting as at the end of Q2 at the 31st of September will be sitting at £35 million, which is a positive message and a slight improvement from the first quarter of this year. And obviously, as we work forward to reduce spend over the next few months, we hope to get to an even more improved position for the future years. Just going to skip the HRA because the HRA is coming to the next overview and scrutiny meeting, and that's when Naz and Jackie can talk to you in a little bit more detail about the HRA. And I was just going to talk to you a little bit about the capital headlines. So the Q2 capital monitoring is forecast to be an underspend of about £57.9 million. And so there's a large reprofiling exercise going on. Most of the underspend is due to slippage, and obviously will be factored into our borrowing and our cost of borrowing over the next few years anyway. So that's just a reprofiling exercise. And when we bring the budget report, you'll see what those changes look like for the future. And I think just wanted to show you the summary of the capital spend. So just a very high level version of what the capital spend is looking like. And as you can see, we took a budget of nearly 260 million for council in March, and the forecast spend is coming in about 202 million pounds for this year. I think that is probably all I want to show at the moment. Any questions?
Okay, thank you. Can you just go back to the slides that had the red and the green and the, because I want to ask about town halls. Because one of the slides showed, I'm sure it showed a drop in income on town halls.
Is that coming up at the moment, Chair, or is that gone from your screen?
Yeah, we can. It's on, but not on the right slide. But anyway, never mind. My question is about town halls then. So
yeah.
What are we attributing the drop in income on town halls, and what is it that we're expecting it to be by the end of the year? And what are we doing to boost that deficit? Councillor Turner, are you wanting to answer anything on town halls?
I'll let Isabel speak and then I'll follow up.
Right, Isabel, the town halls.
Sorry, I'm flicking through the slides trying to find the exact area. What I would say to you is that I'm working very closely with the DEL to look at the town hall income over the next few months. So whilst I can't give you an immediate answer on the detail of that, it is an area that we can see there's a significant issue with achieving income targets in those areas. So we will be looking at what that income target is and making sure that we set the budgets in accordance with what's absolutely achievable in those areas.
So I'm not directly responsible for the bookings in the town hall, but there will have been a drop off. There will have been a drop off in income because of obviously Kirklees being closed for some time now. So that will account for some of it, I have no doubt. Going forward, one of the plans is, as we're developing what we're calling the core asset strategy, is to make better use of our town halls, and that's not only to try and put more events on, get more artists and that type of thing in there to fill them on an evening and the weekend. It's to use them during the day, so we can, where we have capacity within those buildings, we can put offices in there, put community facilities in there. So it's about maximising the use of those town halls going forward, and that forms part of the core estate. So we're looking at, as I said, what other things can we put in there? And as you know, there's an issue in discussions at the moment about Batley Town Hall, which is at this moment in time is vastly underutilised. So we're looking at whether people will go with us to move the library crossing there, to make that building more viable, putting some offices in there. So it's about maximising the space we've got, rather than having it empty a lot, significant parts of the time. So that's all part of the commercialisation programme for those officers to deal with that. You know, more use of them, get more money through the door.
Thank you. Just many years ago now, town halls were in my portfolio, and I can remember looking at how we could use town halls far better, which is why I was interested in what plans there were as well.
Yeah, and when I remember when I had the culture portfolio several years ago now, I did some research into Huddersfield Town Hall, spent a bit of money on what sort of events we could put on there, and unfortunately, because when I was growing up, if I wanted to go to a concert, they were always in town halls. We didn't have big arenas then. Sheffield City Hall was one I frequented on a regular basis. So a lot of musicians and the people who have been around a long time started off in town halls. So I did investigate the Huddersfield Town Hall. Unfortunately, modern fire regulations and the way it's laid out doesn't lend itself to having, shall we say, people with 4 guitars and a noisy drummer at the back, shall we say. So we can't capture that market. We did attempt it, we did test the acoustics, but we couldn't make it work. So hence we're going to, hopefully, at some point in the not too distant future, we're going to have a purpose-built venue.
Councillor Cooper.
So a lot of slides flashed before our eyes then, which almost a blur, really. But a few thoughts. One of which is I saw among the blur there was a lot of red there, which indicated that there's a lot of work to do in terms of achieving savings. The headline I did capture from what you said was that we've got £16 million overspend rather than £20 million overspend. But what we are aware of is there's been an awful lot of pain to get to that point, or pain that's going to hit later. So it's a basic question, really. I mean, how far are we off a Section 114 notice? Have we done enough? Have we done enough? Are we doing enough, or are we? When might a Section 114 notice be issued, or do we think? No. Oh, right, okay, that's.
It won't be. No, we won't be issuing a Section 114 notice. We are doing a lot of work behind the scenes to reduce that spend. Obviously, we have plans in place, and this is the position as at the end of September. We're still a couple of more months into the expenditure. The team and myself are trying to control non-essential spend. We're holding vacancies open, and at this point in time, we are very positive that we will end this year in a better position than we are at the moment, and we will go into the medium-term financial planning for 24-25 with a suite of opportunities that will allow us to balance the books and continue in a resilient way for the budget for Kirklees Council.
Can I just add to that as Isabella was quite right there, we are not going to go into Section 114. We will do absolutely everything within our power to make sure we don't, because that would be the absolute worst outcome for this local authority and its residents. So no matter how much work and how much time and effort it takes, we will find those savings. We will deliver a balanced budget in March to ensure that we don't go into Section 114 territory. Not the case for many other local authorities, but we will not reach that point. We are confident of that because it would, I must reiterate, I keep reiterating that, it would be an absolute disaster for our residents, and we're not going to go there. We will do whatever it takes to get out of that situation. And you're right, Andrew, some of the decisions we've taken, some of the decisions we're going to take, and not without paying for our residents, but you can't take the amount of money out of the budget as we have to do to balance it without it affecting people, because otherwise you might argue what we're spending it on. So it proves that we've been spending it on the right things, because now, unfortunately, we have to take some of those things away from residents, which really is not where we want to be. But we are committed to developing a balanced budget for March.
I do get it, and I understand what you're saying. And just for residents, if it's the local council making a cut to their residential home, a cut to their leisure centre, which we've had some good news on, rising allotment fees, rising parking charges, or a government commissioner. For the folks out, I mean, I'd much rather services were dealt with by people who are elected locally, but for the folks out there, they might not appreciate the difference. What is the difference?
The difference is we're going to make the decision based on our local knowledge and our expertise of our area, and we have the interests of our residents at heart. A commissioner, if you can get one, and I'm told, conversations I had last week that commissioners are in short supply because the demand is growing, because there's so many local authorities heading into Section 114 territory. A commissioner would come, and I've thought about this, and I've had conversation with people who know commissioners, and they would come and they would say, right, that goes, that's it. No consideration of what impact it has, no consideration of long-term impact. So if and I've thought about this a bit, and it's a bit sad really, if I was a commissioner, your 2.55 million that we're going to commit to next year to protect 20,000 membership of CAL, that'd go. If I was a commissioner, that'd go, because it is not a statutory responsibility, so you'll probably end up with 2 sports centres. So it's that sort of thing. How many libraries do we need? We have 24. Under the 1964 Act, reason provision, is 24 reasonable? So you could probably get rid of half of those, or probably 3/4 of those. So that's the sort of decisions they would take, based on simply a spreadsheet, whereas we're making those decisions. And I get it makes us unpopular. I get it makes, in my area, me very unpopular. But I'd rather do it and explain to residents why we're doing it rather than some faceless Whitehall Mandarin who might be nice, they might be nice people, but they'll come on a Monday morning, they'll stay in a hotel, they'll get on a train on Friday night, they'll disappear back down south probably. They won't be here the weekend, they won't see what our residents need. So that's why we're doing it. We're the right people to do it. We don't want to do it, we're not enjoying it obviously, but we're better placed than the Commissioner.
Can I ask then about 24, 25, if we manage to have a balanced budget in March, will we need, how will that be monitored going forward? So will we still be on essential spend only? How long can we remain on only essential spend only?
It's an interesting question, isn't it? And I think we discussed earlier, nobody can see in the future, can there? Yes, we face budget challenges for 24-25. There are still challenges for 25-26, nowhere near as significant, and there are actual budget challenges for 26-27 because demand is rising and there's nothing on the horizon from whoever may be in power at that point that there's any more money for local government. So, and in that period of time, demand will rise, more people will become old and will want to look after a home. We may have more issues around children's services, cost of living crisis, homelessness, all those things that feed into the challenges and pressures we have now will still be there. So there'll be no more challenge for the next few years. And you know, I can't predict beyond that. All I can say is there are challenges in the next 2 years from what we know now and what we can see coming down the line. That's the best we can do. We know there's challenges. We will react accordingly. But I'd say 2-3 years down the line, I don't know. We make the best use of information we have to make those judgments now.
It's just that if we don't put in some early intervention and prevention into our services, then the more expensive and more difficult acute conditions that we wouldn't want people to get to, we may cause problems further down the line for the council. So it's about balancing, isn't it, what we have to do and people's health and well-being as well.
And you're absolutely right, and that's the challenge, and that's the difficult decision-making process, isn't it? Because we all know that if we'd have lost those centres through CAL, for instance, that people's health and well-being, loneliness, all those things would have been impacted on, and further down the line there would have been a cost to the NHS, to the country in general, people not perhaps not being able to work and be economically active. We knew that. That's why we worked really hard, and the officers have been fantastic to get this deal, because we know that knock-on impact, and we've seen that throughout the country with what happened during the worst of austerity, where most local authorities cut a lot of youth services because it wasn't statutory, and it sounds terrible, but it was relatively easy to do because it wasn't statutory. Nobody's going to take you to task over it because you didn't have to provide it. And up and down the country, councils cut youth services, and we all know in its heart of hearts, antisocial behaviour, issues with young people has grown since those services were took away. There was a thing on telly over the weekend, communities now reacting and trying to develop their own community youth clubs and that sort of youth engagement, because they realise the impact of not being provided by council has a knock-on effect. So it's you're right. What do? We try and get the best outcome now and try and stop the worst outcome in the future. But rest assured, as you know, it's not easy trying to get all that balance. And we know there'll be an impact. Whatever we do, there will be long-term impact. But we will do the best we can to make that as limited as possible.
Okay, Councillor Pandor, sorry, you've been very patient.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Isabel, for that presentation. And it's good to know that we are not going to be issued a Section 114 notice in this financial year. What might be an idea, and again, this is about comms, is to get that comms message out there. I know you're doing your best, but I'm just saying that, you know, if you can actually do something a little bit more in terms of reassure our communities that, you know, there's still challenges, but the Section 114 is very, very unlikely. At the same time, what you mentioned, Graham, is really important that, you know, we're going to be working extremely hard to make sure that doesn't happen, but there will be still pain. From what you just said, Graham, is we would rather have control of our own destiny rather than the commissioners coming in and actually. I'm making some recommendations, Chair. I'm trying to actually add value to scrutiny. You know, and again, if we can get some comms out there to actually make our communities or help our communities understand the difference between revenue and capital, because, you know, one of the things that keeps on coming to me is why can't we spend and this is a question, why can't we spend the level of money for this rather than this? But I'm sure there's a very clear explanation. It's earmarked and you can't just switch money around. So it's a simple messages. So if you can shed some light on how we can start to address that, Graham, that would be really useful. Thank you.
I'll just pick that. We do try. We issue press release after press release after press release, and our head of communications is sat behind me, and I believe on our paper there's a communication strategy a bit later on. So we do try, but obviously you can put as much stuff out there, but it is down to the media, what they choose to print, and how they choose to print it as well in some cases. But we do have a very active comms department. We are trying to constantly get our message out there, and hopefully people will watch council, where I constantly try and get that message out of whole council. As you know, for the last couple of council meetings, it seems to be everything I've dealt with has been there. So we constantly are trying to get that message out. Trying to explain capital and revenue to people can be challenging because people don't necessarily understand that we have two budgets in effect, and hopefully people will start to look at. Some of this is about them looking a bit deeper, isn't it? Wanting to understand, I suppose, in some ways, because it is quite complicated. And the money from government for levelling up is ring-fenced. It's as simple as that. It's given to us for a specific project, and we have to spend it on that. And like anything, if they were to give, I presume the money will come in tranches as we move forward. If we decided to divert that money, they'd want it back. And if once we spent it, we can't give it back. So we have to work within the rules, and that's fine, because some of the projects are really, really exciting.
Can I ask about reprofiling of capital while we're on capital? What does that mean, Isabel? And what is it? How is that in relation to affordability going forward?
So if you think of the capital programme in total, and if we spend money in this year, then we would have to start charging capital financing on it next year. And that's the accountancy policy for it. If we reprofile and maybe don't spend in this year, we spend in next year, or we spend in future years, it means the cost of borrowing that capital, using that capital, obviously is shunted onto another year. So the reprofiling, we always build in a level of reprofiling whenever we have a capital programme, because generally, I think probably most of your capital outturns have slipped in previous years, as most councils do. But there is a sort of the knock-on effect of that is that the capital financing for those elements of capital that you're spending becomes possibly slightly cheaper. And it also improves your cash flow. So it might mean that if you're not spending money, then you are not having to borrow so early in order to fund those schemes that are currently unfunded. Is that helpful, Chair?
Yeah, thanks. It's just that people sometimes think that because it's capital, it doesn't have to be paid for, but in actual fact, it does have to be paid for. You know? Yeah, and yes, and there has to be money in the revenue budget to pay for that
To pay
capital,
for it, yeah.
and
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you know, whatever we're spending now has to be paid
It's
for.
a balancing act. It's a very thin balancing act between sort of what you should capitalise and what where you spend money in revenue, because obviously there is an additional cost from borrowing if you spend from capital borrowing. So it's something that we need to manage on an ongoing basis. And just going back to, if I may, picking up Graham's point, the sort of the levelling up funding and the money that we get from government for capital projects is always heavily monitored. So we are scrutinised for every penny that we spend to make sure we deliver exactly what we have committed to deliver. So there would be no way that we could spend that money on other items.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions? No. Thank you, Isabel, for joining us today, and thank you, Graham.
Thank you so much.
See you, Isabel.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
bye.
I think we'll just pause a minute before the next item so that people can get into position in their presentations. Thank you. Welcome back. We're moving on to item 9 on the agenda, the flood risk management strategy 2024. This is here for pre-decision scrutiny before it goes on for decision. So are you going to, Councillor Turner, are you going to...
Yeah, I'll just do a quick introduction. Obviously, this is a huge piece of work. Obviously, flood risk is a major issue for us, being in the foothills of the Pennines, and as we see nationally, it's a growing problem for everyone. So it's a hell of a piece of work, and this seems to be a lot lighter than some of the things I've read in the past about this. So thanks to officers for preparing this, because I say it is a complicated issue as well as being a very important issue at the moment. So I'll let officers talk you through it, but thanks very much to them, because I say it is extremely complicated and watching the flows of water, etc. And we've had some very interesting meetings over the last few months.
Hi members, I'll just run through the presentation. We put the presentation together because we knew the papers were quite lengthy and we thought you'd find this quite useful. So my opening slide, I'll just give a bit of background to what this is. Well, first primary reason why we're having a local flood risk management strategy is because it's a legal requirement under the Flood Water Management Act, and the expectations within it is to ensure that we have a strategy that complies with the national strategy, and that kind of feeds into why we're doing the change. The national strategy has moved forward. It's obviously taken some of the learning and what we know about climate science into consideration. So that's been captured in the national strategy, and our local flood risk management strategy needs to align with the national strategy. So there's been a lot of change in the industry, in the direction of travel of the country, and part of the reason why we're doing it is so we can capture that in our local strategy going forward. The challenge is set out in that bullet point in our current modelling that we've undertaken. On a 1 in 1,000 year rainfall event, we feel there's about 35,000 properties are at risk. Climate change obviously is the challenge here. Even if we feel like we're not doing any further development, climate change alone is a risk to the number of properties that will be at risk within our district. The vision is set out there in the final bullet point. It's simple as it says, to make our communities more resilient to flooding, both now and in the future, and to enhance the environment for future generations. My next slide looks at the local flood authority's roles and responsibilities. And that's us, that's the Kirklees Council. And I've set out some of the key responsibilities that we have. I'll just quickly run through them. I mean, the first one's quite straightforward. I've highlighted its leadership. We will provide the strategic leadership in relation to flooding to other risk management authorities. RMAs within Kirklees include the Highway Authority, includes the Environment Agency, and includes Yorkshire Water. So we are providing that local leadership through this as the lead local authority and through the development of the strategy. And its main purpose there is to develop, maintain and apply, and then our role is to monitor that strategy going forward. It sets out mitigation. We've got a role to perform there. We have the power to carry out work to mitigate flood risk. That's one of our primary functions. We do that in various ways, whether it's engineering defence type schemes or whether it's through communication or education. So other primary function of the lead local authority is investigation. We are quite passionate about this. We set ourselves out to ensure that where we have got flood incidences, we will aim to and endeavour to investigate all of them. The strategy sets out a criteria within it where we would focus our resources, and within it, it does say that we will attempt to investigate all internal flooding of residential homes and businesses. We feel that's quite important. It gives us intelligence, it gives us data, which allows us then to consider our next action going forward. Other role that we've got is assets. We have to maintain a set of asset registers. We have that in place. We continue to enhance that throughout the year as we investigate flood incidences, as we do various investigation surveys. We enhance our knowledge of our assets within the district. We're also the statutory consultee role as the lead local flood authority, where we will comment and advise and inform the planning authority and planning colleagues about what we consider about flood risk within the development. The infographic there in the middle sets out the 3 main sources of flood risk that the lead local authority has the management responsibility for. Surface runoff, the top bullet point, the middle one on the right there is the ordinary water courses and the groundwater. It's probably worth highlighting here, main rivers is the management responsibility of the Environment Agency. Next slide. So this slide sets out the flood risk within Kirklees. It's a lot more detail in the strategy itself. First bullet point is looking at sources of flooding. There are various sources of flooding. We've got the main rivers, we've got the ordinary water courses, we have the surface water runoff, groundwater, and we get flooding from sewers. Worth noting here that as the lead local flood authority, Kirklees Council, we are responsible for the surface water runoff, or the management responsibility for surface water runoff, groundwater, and ordinary water courses. The infographic on the right is kind of pictorially represents all the flood instances that we have recorded to date, and you can see how scattered it is. You can see the north of Kirklees, in the middle, and even the south. It's quite well scattered. It just highlights that the risk within Kirklees is quite widespread. The takeaway from this is really that given that you've got we have such a wide spread of flood incidences, honing on a single engineering solution isn't going to be a solution. While resilience in the strategy is quite important, and we'll go into talking a bit about that going forward, but that's what that highlights. Final bullet point on this slide, it's about surface water flood risk. There's a few numbers in there, highlighting the number of residential properties and non-residential property in a 100-year flood event. So my first slide looked at 1 in 1,000. This slide is looking at 1 in 100, and it highlights the impact of climate change there, what it does to the number of properties. We've uplifted 45% of rainfall intensities to help us to model what that might look like going forward. And we've done that based on the highest emission scenario within the UKCP, the UK United Kingdom Climate Projections 18. So in itself, we are predicting that the flood risk within Kirklees is going to increase. This slide looks at the strategic objectives within the strategy. There are 6 of them. I'll start from the left. Evidence. I mean, we feel that's a very critical part of the strategy. Evidence is ensuring that we have the right data, right intelligence, so we're making informed decisions going forward. It's making sure that we stay up to date with research and continue to undertake flood studies going forward. Adapt is about recognising that the climate change scenario itself is changing within a moving environment, and that we've got to be adaptive to that environment as we move forward. And even so, to the effect that even though we're making decisions today, we are mindful that we may have to adapt to those decisions in the future. Innovation and sustainable, they're quite common terms, but we have to remain innovative going forward. One of the key innovations within the strategy is looking in private finance in funding some of these flood mitigation methods that we may have. And it's recognised about partnership working and how we can explore that going forward. But the heart of it, and I suppose the soul of it, is really the 2 centre strategic objective you've got there, which is communities and partnership. It's very much focused on making sure our communities are mitigated against the flood risk going forward. Partnership recognises that we can't do this alone. We don't own all the land. We don't have all the money. So partnership working with key actors like the National Trust and Yorkshire Water, big landowners who have their own funding streams, who are aligned with contributing to the Council's local strategy in mitigating its impact. So, oops. Have I just done something there? Okay, so this slide looks at some of the partners that we work with. It just shows the extent of the communities that we work with. I might just mention a few. You'll recognise a few there. It's worth pointing out Create Space in the bottom right corner. S2R is a local charity that we are starting to work with, and that's to support us in working with flood communities that might have flooded and have mental health issues. We've got Healthy Minds down there. We work with Yorkshire Water. We have the Slow the Flow, a charity that operates in Caldale, the Forestry Commission, and we have working relationship with these organisations. We have 2 key partnerships that we have, the Our Future Landscape Partnership that operates in the Corner and Home operational catchment, and then we've got the Air Calder Partnership that operates in the more northern part of Kirklees. There's 4 strategic themes in the strategy. I'll quickly run through them. They're on the page. Placemaking. So this is really making sure that we are considering land use in combination with flood risk. It's making sure that we are making the right choices where we develop and giving the appropriate advice going forward. Protect is very much about engineering defence schemes, doing mitigation like natural flood management, introducing property flood resilience at people's homes. So these are actual interventions that we plan to undertake under the Protect theme. Response to recover, this theme within the strategy is about supporting communities in preparing for a severe weather event. It's making sure that we communicate that with them, making sure they're best placed and they are informed about the flood risk that they face going forward. So, and the recovery is about supporting communities once the flood event has passed. This is very much about going out, providing whatever support we can, whether it's cleaning up exercises, whether it's providing escapes, going forward. But importantly, it's about us going out and understanding how is established the flood outlines and trying to understand the kind of rainfall event we had, what we understood from modelling, and is it what we'd expected going forward. That's the recovery theme. Climate change, I've got a slide on climate change because it's a big part of the strategy going forward. I think we're aware of the issues going forward. I mean, we are expecting warmer, wetter winters and hot, dry summers. And that alone is going to, I think we're seeing that quite often. I mean, recently we've seen some flood events taking place. These are making things quite challenging as the climate changes. Managing flood risk and predicting flood risk is quite challenging with the climate scenarios that we see them. We have modelled that. What you see on the map on the right, the infographic there, is modelling various uplifts to allow for climate change. We've got a 30% uplift. It's not really so clear, but you can see the orange. It just shows when you put an uplift of 30% to rainfall intensities, you can see the impact it's having on the modelling. And then we've done a 45% uplift on climate change, and that's shown in the green. And it's quite faint, but there are the areas there that on the map that it shows in the areas that it's going to be affected. And the bullet point on the left, I've got some numbers there about the impact of climate change that we're forecasting. We're expecting properties at risk to increase, residential properties at risk to increase by 5,000, and non-residential properties to increase by 1,800 once we allow for a 45% climate change uplift. Final slide is the measures. The action plan we've got in the strategy. I've just produced a few. I don't intend to go through them, but I felt it was important to highlight that we've categorised the measures into 4 areas, into the themes. So we've got a few for placemaking, we've got a few in protect, we've got a few in respond, and we've got a few measures that we want to focus on under recovery. And it's worth highlighting that the funding of these are very primary 2 sources. There's the grant in aid that we bid for via the environment managers, and the other main source of funding is often the local level. We do get the often odd grants that might come forward that we would bid to that will provide the funding to help us deliver those measures that we've listed in the strategy. I'll end it there. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Open it up for questions. Councillor Cooper.
Okay, so thanks for that. Interesting stuff. I mean, it's the first 1,000. It's a 1 in 1,000 year event that happens in the first year or two, isn't it? That's the problem with a lot of these things. And I think, oh, that means we're okay for the next 998 years. So there we go. Yeah, a few thoughts. Key performance indicators with this. Just thinking, what are the things that we're measuring? And I noticed you've got the action plan there and you've got the measures in there. So I was wondering if there are things that we're measuring to sort of show progress. So that was one particular thought. What are the things where we look at and say, well, this is where we're succeeding or not. One of the things that occurs to me is the number of developments which are actually using sustainable urban drainage systems as part of the work that they're doing. I'm not convinced that that's happening everywhere, and that maybe there's more that we could do with the local plan. So maybe something. Just interested to know what input you're going to be having in the local plan, and what the ideal scenario would be from your point of view in terms of the review to the local plan that's coming forward. So there's that. The response to flooding events. Some are quite small scale. Some are just surface water flooding where somebody's bungalow or whatever becomes prone to a small flooding incident around their house because the area's waterlogged. I've come across instances where Kirklees neighbourhood housing has been unable to respond quickly to people who need sandbags against the back of their door. You know, really simple things. So flooding, people think of flooding as like huge areas being awash, but sometimes it's just the back of somebody's house which has some water coming up. So I'm not convinced that we're well geared up for that. One thing we've done locally is we've got a material called flood sacks. They're what are they? Sandless sandbags. They're called. Which, and we've used our local ward budget to get that. And we've actually been out as local councillors and given those to people who are at threat of flooding. And I think it's something that, if we have community organisations who are able to respond, just like we have snow wardens, we have flood wardens who are actually properly equipped, I think that might be a useful thing for us to do. Also interested in best practice from other local authorities. You know, where's the best in class in terms of flooding, flood management and dealing with it, and what is it? Who are the people who we're looking at, who we aspire to be? Or maybe they aspire to be us, who knows? But it'd be interesting to know what work is going with other local authorities to try and ensure that we are best in class. Thank you.
I'll take the first question, Councillor Cooper, about KPIs. Yeah, we have a few KPIs within the team, so we do keep an eye on them on a monthly basis. So one would be asset numbers, for example. We log all the asset numbers that we have, and then we review that. So we do a number of investigations. So we do get colleagues and officers to report that back, and we are monitoring that. So we will have a target to say we want to increase our asset database by, say, 1% year on year. So we look at the start of the year, we look at the end of the year, and we see how much of our asset data has increased. You know, that investigation work that we've been undertaking, are we meaningfully updating the asset knowledge that we have? Because that's key, because that tells us a lot about the communities that we need to advise and respond to. We've got other assets like number of properties that we've better protected. We have that in our list of KPIs, so we'd set a target for that. But we could do various flood defence schemes, or whether it's PFR, property flood resilience works. And when we're undertaking that, we will then record the fact that we've supported and better protected a number of houses, a number of businesses, and we have a target for that that we report. We as a team will do that collective monthly basis. Some of these could be educational campaigns where we think we've educated the community a little bit better about the risks that they face, so they can better help themselves. We try to keep a log of that as well. So we do have that in our makeup, and that needs to be strengthened. That we respect the fact that's quite important, because that's, until you don't do that, you don't know how well you're performing going forward, and is there any room for further improvement. I'll probably touch on, I don't know whether, Paul, you want to take this, but I'll do the surface flooding bit now. But you're right. I mean, surface flooding, it's quite challenging because it's rain falling on a hill, for example, or an open space. It just runs off fields, upland fields, into somebody's back garden, and it could be 1, 2 or 3 properties. We have supported communities like that using various grants. We did a lot of work last year using PFR. We've learnt a lot from that. We've realised 5,000 was the grant didn't go far enough, and we have got further schemes and grants. We are putting together another application to the Environment Agency where we will increase that to something about 20,000-30,000, so people don't have to put their hand in the pocket going forward. So we do recognise where we have got the 1 or 2 houses, it can be quite challenging. Sandbags, you've touched on sandbags there, Councillor Cooper. I mean, we are doing a couple of trials at the moment. We have got a plan where we are thinking about looking at deploying sandbags in high-risk locations. So when you have a severe weather flood event, you know, as a council, we look towards volunteers and resources that we have in-house to help us to deliver the sandbag. That can be quite challenging at the time, especially when the severe weather event happens at 6 o'clock in the evening or 8 in the evening. So we have got a trial that's undertaking place in 2 high-risk areas where we have got flood sacks. We've managed to secure some money from a source, and we have trialled them. We're not committed as a council to providing them in the future. We are committed to sandbags, and if this trial is successful, we then look to increase the locations to up to 10 to high-risk areas where we can deploy sandbags. But I think we've got to just recognise around about sandbags, it's a low level of defence. I think the ambition should be a little further than that. We get the importance of supplying sandbags. So I think our approach is very much looking at making permanent changes to the fabric of a building, PFI in effect, where people don't have to rely on sandbags, they don't have to be so much dependent on the council having to get them delivered. But we do recognise until that doesn't happen, we have to provide a short-term interim solution, and that's why we were keen. So we have got that in our makeup. And part of the measures is we are looking to develop flood wardens, flood community groups, and we are working on that. We have got colleagues, and we do that informally, but we want to formalise that going forward. We have a few communities in our minds that we want to get champions established who we can communicate regularly, and they can communicate with us directly. And we do share our inbox emails to them, so they can do that. In terms of best practice, I mean, as a council, we work very closely with Wake Yorkshire colleagues. We have a scheme that's there's a body called ICASP, which is based in Leeds University, and they are constantly advising us about the research. We are looking at a lot of monitoring and evaluation work that we do. We do that very closely with an organisation called ICASP. We have a project where the 5 authorities have come up with a plan, a number of themes within it. Community resilience is one that the Kirklees Council is leading on. We have PFR that Bradford Council is leading on. We have the enhancement of flood warning systems that Wakefield's leading on, and we collectively meet every so often, sharing that best practice, sharing that knowledge that we can, because quite often scaling up the solution is quite important. But we also got to recognise that the catchment approach is key, because a lot of the runoff that comes from Candlelaine will enter Kirklees, and a lot of the runoff that we collect goes into Wakefield. So we recognise that the catchment approach is quite important, so that collective working is going to be here to stay. We're going to talk a bit about SUDS, Paul, and development sites, and the other one was, I suppose, the local plan, wasn't it?
Yeah, in terms of SUDS, you could be looking at sustainable drainage that infiltrates into the ground well, steepness of slopes in Kirklees, and the actual soil content. Makes it rather difficult in places, and you'll be creating a flood risk if it goes wrong further down the line. You know, they might have a 20-year lifespan if they work quite well and are maintained, but in a lot of areas they just won't work, and it's probably up to about 90% of the areas really. Little areas like Farnley Tyres, that will prove to be quite successful, but it's you know, for big estates we've not got that many examples of soakaways in Kirklees. In terms of seeing SUDS, because it doesn't necessarily have to infiltrate, it's, I think nationally councils have got bogged down in just the flood risk aspect of drainage, whereas SUDS crosses over into biodiversity, because it's you know, green channels. You will start to see a lot more detention ponds or detention basins on site, and the reason why we think we've been held back nationally is because adoption and looking after these systems until recently, where they changed the definition of a public sewer, the water companies weren't interested. Councils have their own issues with commuted sums and finances, but Yorkshire Water can adopt these systems now, even if it does go to ground. So you will start to see more and more surface features on site. In terms of what might happen next is that in the Floods and Water Management Act 2010, Schedule 3 was to make local authorities a SUDS approval board, a SUDS approval body, and that will take drainage out of the planning system and run it alongside. At the moment, there's not much coming out of DEFRA to say how that's going to happen. It's already in Wales, and there's a Welsh experience which is mixed. But Kirklees can only best prepare by being a member of the Association of SUDS Authorities and working on national groups, which we're a part of. And including that includes allied departments, our landscape architects, they're in the biodiversity groups as well. So you will begin to see more SUDS. How that pans out in a year's time with elections and things like that, but they've not told us, so I can't tell you. All right.
Okay. Yeah, really quick, because other people.
Yeah. Okay. Just one or two things on that. Obviously, there's things like green roofs, which we could specify. So it's not just, if you like, the soakaways, it's other items as well. Water butts. Water butts are things that you know, could slow the flow, as it were. So that those are things that we could look at. I do wonder about having we've got the snow wardens, and I do wonder about actually piggybacking skills on terms of flood wardens and having flood sacks associated with that as being things that they can do. So they're looking at those sort of the environmental impacts of the weather on local people and seeing if there's something there we could do to build on that. So yeah, just some thoughts.
Oh, not got a deep and booming voice enough then. In terms of the local planning, in terms of this strategy, there's certain things that we have to do. We are a statutory consultee in the planning process for surface water flood risk. You end up advising on all sorts of things to planners as well because you're the go-to people on that one. In terms of a strategy though, and how we affect the local plan, we are going to work on a strategic flood risk assessment which is based around allocations of sites. Our last one is 2016. I think the previous one to that might have been 2008 before I joined the council. Looking back, because I've been here since 2009 myself, I don't think it had much of an impact first time round when we had the UDP. I think it allowed a lot of sites to be located in high-risk flood zones. Yes, you'd have the flood risk assessments to raise levels and things like that, but it only makes it safe-ish. It's not an avoidance tool. And I found it was a long way to try and strengthen that process, and we did it very well in the SFRA of 2016, which led into the local plan, because we were allowed to influence where we got functional floodplains, where water should go, and that has a lot of restrictions on what you can build there. And I know you'll hear in the pub that we do place, there's flood risk there because you place houses in harm's way. I can safely say that our last local plan had no housing allocations in the high-risk flood zones. Might be a challenge this time. What we can't control is what comes forward in the local plan, which should be debated. But I'm looking this time to separate ourselves from Wakefield and Halifax in this sense, because I think the RSF area will directly feed into our local plan. When we've done it before, we've all been at different stages, and it was more important for us at that time, and we wanted a stronger definition. And we believe we've got a mandate out of this strategy, because when we've gone to public consultations, that's what you're hearing all the time, is why are you building in flood zones? Well, actually we're not, but it is a battle. It is a battle to keep that scenario as it is now. We have to develop in lower flood risk areas first, but if you haven't got that supply, it opens up the chance of you developing in those places. And obviously there's other mitigating reasons. There's other reasons why you might not want to develop higher up in the system, greenbelt, which obviously we can't influence. So we were looking to go that alone, and we've got a mandate to go with our recommendations as strong as possible. And then that has to go into obviously our planning policy team. Look at the allocations. A lot of our efforts this year will be going to look at towards planning. And I think it's really important because we can do all the other stuff that's in there, but it's so key because you can reduce flood risk elsewhere, but if you're adding to it by placing things in harm's way, you're undoing all your good work. So we'll be looking at supporting the planners in the process of looking at all the allocations that go in at a higher level, and we're working with the EA hopefully to get the support to be as strong as we can in these definitions that will keep housing out of flood zones. So that's where we can really influence.
Okay, thank you. As for building houses in high-risk areas under the current local plan, I'm sure there would be some residents who would argue with that. But Councillor Rama, you've been patiently waiting. Councillor Rama.
I've been patiently waiting until my question's actually been answered, because I was going to refer to planning and development and whether the flood management team had enough input. It's been answered. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any other points on this item? Can I just ask quickly then, you've got in your document, you talk about partners, Yorkshire Water, Environment Agency, etc. But in your strategy, you don't really mention how how you all work together, and is there anything that you can do to encourage partners to reduce timescales, etc., where there are risks and where it is their responsibility to sort that risk? How do we as a council influence those partners to be able to bring forward the schemes that will sort problems out?
Yeah, I mean, we've got I mean, the environment agency is quite regular. We go to their committee meetings, we raise our concerns with them all the time. We undertake various studies where we understand that risk, where once we've done that, we tend to obviously learn, develop, understand where those risks are, which bodies are responsible for that. We work with them quite closely. We meet Yorkshire Water and the EA on a regular monthly basis. We have the Our Future Landscape meetings where a lot of the partners that I put on that slide come to, where we will then raise our concerns, our issues, our strategy to them. The Air Calder partnership that I mentioned, that focuses on the more northern parts of Kirklees, the River Calder areas, where we again raise our issues and concerns to them. And you know, not just concerns, but where we've done studies, we may come up with a design proposal where we may need their support, access to their land, and they may have opportunities of further funding that we could use, get the partnership funding garnered, so we can work collectively to deliver those projects. So I do feel that we are regularly out there engaged with those partners in moving forward. We've done collective bids before to DEFRA in the past. So I'm quite really sure that we are reaching out to our partners and getting the support that we need from them, and getting our message across. I mean, once this strategy is formally adopted, we've got a rollout plan where we will reach out to these, undertake a various number of workshops with them, highlighting the strategy, what we think needs to happen. So we've got that plan hopefully in the new year where we would communicate that.
Okay, thanks. And working with other local authorities, you mentioned Wakefield and you mentioned Calderdale as well. But when you're looking at the high-risk catchments for surface water, in actual fact, Leeds and Bradford also we need to engage, because your map actually goes over the borders of Kirklees into Leeds and Bradford on your high-risk catchments for surface water. So I realise this is implementation rather than strategy, but how are you strengthening from strategy to implementation the fact that we have areas where there are problems with surface water and the council needs to have a regular plan of clearing gullies, etc., to be able to reduce that? And how are you working with other local authorities so that the water, when it's coming down the hill, it doesn't know the boundaries between local authorities, does it? So how are you working with other local authorities to be able to improve that, so in actual fact there is a slowdown of surface water?
Yeah, we're regularly in touch with our equivalents across the districts. I've been a few times to Calderdale Council. We work quite closely with the flood risk manager in Bradford Council Leeds. I touched on a scheme that we are developing collectively. It has 5 themes. I can't recall them all, but we have shared them amongst ourselves. So we are constantly engaged with our issues and they engage with their issues going forward. We've done a number of visits to Leeds Council, Calderdale Council, sharing our concerns, them sharing their some of their proposals to us, how they are managing their surface water flow risk, looking at various such schemes that they've installed. So we're kind of getting the message out there to say that there's things that you can do that prevents the surface water runoff from coming to our parts of the catchment. I touched on earlier about some of the flood warning systems that we're trying to put within our district that will help to forewarn districts downstream, such as Wakefield. So that's a scheme that we are doing. So yeah, it does. We do work with them quite often, quite regularly. It's certainly in developing bids for projects, and we meet quite regularly on those themes.
It just feels in the strategy that just needs a bit strengthening, really, right. In that. And you also mentioned about protecting individuals, so sandbags in high-risk locations, absolutely, yes. But there isn't really anything for high-risk locations where you can get a lot of surface water, and it's how people know where to go if they've never had that surface water coming at them before. But also, yeah, I mean, you know, yeah, but you know, sometimes you get, well, it's us, sometimes you get it's Yorkshire Water, and you get betwixt and between. And it's about having that joined up approach. And this strategy, I just felt it didn't altogether, I know it's the Kirklees' strategy, but it just didn't feel that there was that joined up approach as part of this strategy. That was just my comment. Are there any other points then? No? Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Right, okay. So item 10 then, the communication strategy. Councillor Turner, thank you for your time today. We're going to switch cabinet members to Councillor Davis now for this item, for the communication strategy. So, Councillor Davis, do you want to start off? Thank you for waiting while we got to this item.
Absolutely no problem at all. I'll say very little apart from introducing the main speaker, obviously Marcus, who heads up strategic comms for us. Marcus is going to take us through the strategy, and clearly I'll pick up any questions from a portfolio perspective later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Marcus. I'm Head of Strategic Communications, and I'm here to update you on the communication strategy, and particularly what we're planning for 2024. But before I start doing that, just a little bit of background. I appreciate we're a bit pushed for time, so I won't take long. I'll start with a bit of background about why we take the approach that we take in communications. And it sort of begins in 2019 when the LGA peer review said that Kirklees should take a strategic approach to its communications. And as I've just introduced myself, I'm Head of Strategic Communications, not just Head of Communications or Head of Marketing or any of the various other job titles that you could come up with for my role, because the organisation has taken a specific decision to pursue that. The paper that went out to you set out in a bit of detail what I mean by strategic communications, some of the characteristics of it. But to sum it up, I would say it's a move away from a kind of reactive press office type organisation to something more planned, proactive, and strategic. And across sectors, strategic communications is kind of industry standard now. And in 2022, when we agreed the first communication strategy, we set out to build as much of that strategic communications into our work as we possibly could. And we said we would do that in three ways. That's through narrative, through reach and engagement, and through evaluation. And just for the next few minutes, I'd just like to take you through how we've been achieving what I've called the pillars of strategic communications, and how we're going to develop them in 2024. So I'll start off with narrative. Now, this is about being proactive in our communications. It's about being planning what we're doing and being objectives focused. It's about telling a consistent story, and I emphasize the word story because storytelling is the most effective means of communication that anyone's ever come up with so far. The alternative is simply broadcasting news, which is proven to be less effective. So since we've introduced the strategy, we've done three main things to try and build narrative in the work that the Communications Service does. We've improved our business planning, and a good way of improving business planning is to have a business plan. So we have one of those, and I've appended to the report are proposals for 2024 tied to the priorities that have been set out to the council in the updated council plan. We've updated our methodology, so our service, when they're planning a campaign, they have a template and advice and guidance on how to structure that campaign as effectively as possible. And thirdly, we're taking a campaigns approach to our work. Campaigns are really the manifestation of strategic communications. They're planned, they're objectives focused, they're organised, and I just want to spend a moment to articulate that or illustrate that from a real campaign, and that picture's a bit of an obvious clue to which campaign. So in 2023, this year, we had the local elections were a bit different and required a campaign to remind voters to bring ID with them to vote. What does a campaign look like? What are the features of a campaign? What do we try and build into our work? So here, building brand, so achieving our consistency of message by using colour schemes, by using consistent artwork and illustrations to reinforce messages. So you would have seen these kind of designs go out for months ahead of the elections to try and reinforce that. That's a feature of a campaign, rather than writing separate messages or drawing up separate messages. Channel optimization, a clever way of describing putting the right sort of content on the right social media channel. So during that campaign, you'll see the two images on the left are what we used for Facebook. It's a very brand heavy, brand orientated. But on the right for Instagram, Instagram is a platform that likes pictures of people. It won't boost you if you do pretty much anything else. So you can see we've taken a different approach on Instagram there. And the final element is targeting. So a campaign's approach, through the planning process, you can identify which audiences need targeting. So the research for the voter ID, for voter ID, kind of told us that some younger people might be those who are less likely to turn up at the polling station with ID. So we thought of ways we could target them. So we used Snapchat, which will hopefully work here. I don't know if you know Snapchat, but they're very short, basic messages like that coming up. And that reached 174,000 for a few £100. This is 175,000 accounts. 3,348 people clicked through. That is a much higher rate than if you were a commercial outfit buying an advert on Snapchat. You'd probably expect a fraction of that. So that worked quite well for us, and we had some local authorities approach us to ask us about the campaign, which was good. So that kind of, in a nutshell, is a sort of thing that we do when we're taking a campaigning approach. The second pillar of strategic communications is about reach and engagement. Really, these are the bottom line of communications, is reaching people, getting your message to them, and engagement is about them responding to your message. It's our primary purpose. What have we been doing in the last year or so to boost reach and engagement? Well, we've reviewed our social media channels. We've tried to build a better understanding of who follows us, where they are, who they are. So, for example, we know that Facebook, our largest audience for Kirklees, is women aged 35 to 44. We know that Huddersfield is overrepresented in our followers, even beyond its relative size as well. And some interesting facts as well, that we have more followers on Instagram from Home Firth and Dewsbury, which you wouldn't necessarily expect on the demographics, but you might expect if you know more about those communities. And the thing we know about Twitter or X, depending on your preference, is that you can't get data out of X anymore since the new management moved in. It's very, very difficult to analyse. Either way, we've learnt a lot about our channels. We know that we reach about 300,000 accounts every month on Facebook alone, and about 80,000 as far as we can tell on Twitter/X. We've set up a knowledge bank which we have populated with the details of all our channels, so that when colleagues are planning a campaign, they have at their fingertips all the various ways they can get messages out. That's not just who we're reaching on social media, it's things like where you can buy advertising, how much it costs to put a sign on the back of a bus, all those kind of things, so that we can plan our campaigns as well as we can. And the final thing that we've done is to look at our audiences more and establish where our gaps might be. So we've got a gap with women under 24 years old on our social media channels. There aren't many people who fit that demographic who follow us. So we've reached out on a new channel, which just provide a very quick example here, Spotify. We use some advertising for the Ask for Angela campaign, which is about women's safety with funding from the combined authority. And we managed to reach that age group, again, beyond what you would expect if you were commercially buying an advert from Spotify. Next year we need to develop more of a channel plan for each of our channels, how we're going to get more followers, establish some more tone and guidelines and rules to use them, and also get an even better idea of our audiences. The final pillar of strategic communications that I'd just like to take you through is evaluation. Evaluation kind of brings it all together, really. It's about understanding where we can deliver continuous improvement, where we can learn from what we've done, and we can increase our efficiency and our learning overall. So we evaluate all our campaigns. We see what worked, what didn't work, what the inputs and outputs were. We've established a forum for learning within the team. Quarterly we meet face to face to go through our campaigns and share best practice about the things that we think are working or haven't worked, or new things that we've done. And finally, we have some performance indicators that we have developed, which I'll just take you through. I'll take you through one of them in a moment. But the other thing we do is we do track each of our posts, and we measure them as to whether they're effective or not. And I've just got examples from 3 channels here of where we have been successful and what that says about communications and where we haven't been successful. So on Facebook, a kind of nondescript, aesthetically anyway, picture of a gritter had an enormous reach and engagement, really, but that shows you about capturing the zeitgeist, really. People are interested in what the council's doing during cold weather. Conversely, a national campaign with a stock image of people not from Kirklees about, I think this is about no smoking or giving up smoking, much lower reach, and it shows that local connection is something audiences engage in. Instagram, again, we find Instagram is very people happy, so that's the Christmas light switch on at Huddersfield a few weeks ago. Far more popular than a national tourism campaign featuring a building, wonderful though that building is, not to the users of Instagram at that point. So we've learned some lessons there about how to use Instagram better. And finally, on X, probably our most viral moment of the year was a colleague from the communications team at the local elections. I appreciate the members were probably quite busy on May the 4th this year, but it was dressing up in Star Wars attire on polling day with a dog. You've really hit hit several criteria for going viral there, and that indeed did go viral and featured in every national newspaper on all the broadcasters as well. Unlike, again, a national campaign with stock imagery that worked slightly less well. This is just to illustrate how we're learning and how we're measuring, how we're evaluating. I can't remember, there was something... I mean, I'm going to note that down, Councillor Cooper, for next time the elections fall on May the 4th. But yeah, I'm sure the team have come up with a good pun. Just finally, the basic underpinnings of the service are who's following us. So we're building all our channels each year. We want to do more than that, and I appreciate also that these are social media channels, and I want to add some press coverage and website coverage as well into our performance indicators for future years. So that's my brief run through the communication strategy, and happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you. Maybe the reach outside of Huddersfield, maybe if it was made more local to people outside Huddersfield, you might reach more people outside Huddersfield.
I think
but that's just a comment from me. Questions then? Any questions? Councillor Cooper?
Well, a dubious claim to fame is I suggested that the council takes up Instagram, so those 3,000 whatever followers you've got. That's as I say, it's gradually rising, but you know, I'm sure it'll take off eventually. You mentioned those people that you find difficulty getting to, and I was thinking of not a user of it myself, but TikTok, I'm told by the youngsters, is quite an interesting medium for people. So I don't know whether that hit some of your demographics which maybe aren't being reached at the moment, and I just wonder how that might actually sort of be employed as well. And a more broad question, I guess, is that I guess you're the comms team for the whole council, and so I just wonder, you know, what's actually done beyond the ruling administration to promote the great work that's been done by councillors who might not just be part of the Labour administration.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Well, I have to credit where it's due on Instagram. You did mention that a couple of years ago, and we have tried to build that channel. I see you're now surfing on that success to try and bring TikTok into it. Who knows, maybe in 2 years' time. I think TikTok is a difficult channel for a local authority to credibly enter. It's not something we've ruled out, but it's also something that I don't want to do wrong or bad, although sometimes you get the message out if you do things badly, but that may not be what we want. But we're certainly looking into it. At the moment, we've been looking at things like Spotify, Snapchat, those channels have looked to meet our criteria. So if it's for younger people, seem to fit it better than TikTok at the moment. And there are also some security issues with TikTok as well that are quite well known, probably no more actually than other channels. But it's not something we've ruled out, but we want to get the right content on that. Just on the wider council issue, yes, we do mainly cover the administration. We mainly try and be transparent about the decisions that have been made by the council, which largely come through the cabinet. We try and keep members informed about that as well as we can, but I do think there probably is a space for us to in some way support the work that goes on elsewhere, perhaps through place standard work and those sorts of things, and ward budgets as well, which I think would be a legitimate use. I mean, resourcing would be an issue. There are 69 councillors. That would be quite difficult to make a specific promise, but I appreciate the point and I'll take that away.
Councillor Armour.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a slightly impassioned plea for the older members of society. We're not all on social media. We don't all follow TikTok. I thought that was just a time slipping by at my age, but perhaps I was mistaken. But I would say, can we also not forget the more traditional methods and ways of putting messages across? Thank you.
I appreciate that from what you've heard from me, it was quite social media heavy, but that doesn't define everything we do. It's easy to measure social media because you can pull data out of it quite easily and manipulate it. But we do, part of a campaign's approach is to look at which audiences we're trying to influence. We do still do a lot of printing for hard copy materials. If you look at the leisure centre consultation, for example, that had a lot of paper copies because that was something that we identified. We do still do outdoor advertising as well, buses, posters, those sorts of things. It is very much part of the mix, though we can never get away from the fact that social media largely is free for the council, and at times like this, that's quite a good option for us. Huddersfield's also quite unusual in having a daily local newspaper still. I haven't experienced that for quite a few years, and we do use that as well because we know their demographic is away from social media. So we do try and use the best mix that we can, but it's always something to keep an eye on because it is easy just to press the button and put stuff on a website and social media.
I think there are other daily newspapers as well that are available across Kirklees that people in different parts of Kirklees may access, and whilst they may pick up from reporters, etc. I think it's about whether we utilise those to the best. But can I ask as well? We've talked a little bit today about communications in the different items we've had, and whilst you've got communications when there are consultations and then when there are decisions, then it seems to go quiet about then what's happening after those decisions have been made. And I just wondered if there was any plans that you had in your 24 to actually continue communications, to look at work that's happening following a decision. Okay. But when I was reading your paper, your first couple of paragraphs, you say about your mission, and your service has retained its core mission from 22-23, which is to build a strategic communications function. And my first response was, well, if that was in 22-23, why haven't you got it built already? So do you just want to comment on why you're keeping that mission statement?
Just going back to your consultation point, yes, we can take that away. I agree it's quite often easy to focus on the immediate mission and then spend less time on the follow-up. So I'll certainly take that away. In terms of the mission, I don't think it's I think it is a long-term process to build the kind of service that I want to build for Kirklees, and it's constantly changing. Communications is one of those things that there are always new channels, new ways of doing things, new issues crop up, and it is simply a means to an end to informing people. That's what we really want to do, inform, engage, and influence people.
Just in terms of the strategy, I think clearly that that strategy is there, and I was going to say something similar. Really, that strategy has evolved, and there have been changes, and there's been various stresses and strains, haven't there? From COVID, the pandemic, through obviously to other events that we didn't see, where there has to have been agility and flexibility from the comms team. Cost of living is a good example, and the pressures we faced there, where the comms team did a fantastic job in pulling together the overall communications on the cost of living activities, the initiatives, and Councillor Hammer's point about using different media. We recently reprinted the booklet that we distributed, thousands of those booklets, which have gone down really well in terms of helping people connect. So I think that framework is in place, and it's because it's in place, we've been able to respond effectively to some of these new pressures, and it will continue to develop. I think from my perspective, and I know from the Cabinet's perspective, certainly we've seen that change over the last few years towards what Marcus was referring to as that storytelling, as that ability to talk about the council in the fullest sense and not simply have press releases. I think we're very good at putting press releases out, but somehow we have to create a conversation within our communities and within our overall borough about the council, and hopefully a positive conversation, but sometimes you have to have those negative conversations to learn from that as well. I think that's evolving, definitely. I think that's changing in the way we are communicating as an administration. So I do think it's there. Is there ever going to be a final date where everything is going to be absolutely ticked off? Probably not. I think the whole point is to have an enabling framework, which I think we have, which itself will develop as we go along. I don't know if that's a fair point, Marcus.
I've got nothing to add.
Right, yes. It's just maybe something in your strategy then around what you said to explain that, why it still is to build. I think that would perhaps strengthen that a little bit. Okay. All right. Any other questions then? No? Okay. Right. So thank you very much for that. So we talked about different channels. We talked about different media other than social media. We talked about messages after consultation and decision. And we also talked about your mission statements. Okay. All right. Thanks ever so much for your time. Right then, we will move then on to lead members' reports, and the first one is environment climate change. Councillor Lawson, do you have anything to add to the report that we've got in front of us? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As you can actually see the report, which takes it up till October, when I was then appointed to the chair. We've then had a further meeting on the tree management policy, plus the air quality thing. We've also had to cancel the meeting in November, but we are aware that we cannot cancel any further meetings from there, and that's it basically.
Thank you. Does anybody have any points they wish to raise under that item? Thank you. Then there's the Scrutiny Lead Member Report for Growth and Regeneration. Councillor Panner, do you have anything to add to the report in front of us? I realise that's maybe a bit unfair because we've had 2 lead members before you on this panel this year.
Take it as written. Take it as written, Chair, thanks.
Thank you. Any points on that, lead members? And then we go to the work programme. Are there any points to raise on the work programme? No. So as far as the next meeting is concerned, it's 9th of January. Can I just quickly mention for the minutes, because this is the first OSMC since I took this action, just for noting that as Chair of Scrutiny, I issued a notice of concern against the parking charges Cabinet report, but that is just for noting here that notice of concern was raised because it was discussed at the Cabinet meeting, and it is to the matter is to be discussed at call-in Scrutiny meeting tomorrow. Okay. Thank you ever so much for your time today, and we will close the meeting there. Thank you.